All right, so for some practice problems, we're going to start out by looking at just the domain and the range. So for this first one, we're looking at the domain and the range. Remember, domain is just your x values. So all you're really asking for there is what are those x values? So our x values in this case, we typically list them in order from the smallest one to the biggest one. So 2, 4, 6, and 10. But then our range would be the y values. I'll write that up here. Our range would be from -1, then 0, then 4, and then 8. And if your domain and your range ever repeat themselves, you don't have to write them more than once. But that is something to note. For this one, our domain is simply all of those. That's our domain right there. And our range is all of these. So pretty self-explanatory. But there will be something like that where you'll want to make sure we know how the domain and range play into functions. Actually identifying whether something is a function or not is much different than that. You've got to actually look at what those numbers are. So when it's a list of points, pretty easy. You look at 2, 3, 5, 2. So you'll notice all we care about is the x values. We don't care about the y values. And you probably saw that that 2 repeated itself. And so that is not a function. No, that is not a function because the x is repeated, right? The x repeats. So anytime your x repeats, not a function. For example, b though, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no repetition there, so we are good to go. Yes, that is a function. For example, 3 and the rest of these, it's actually pretty straightforward because you're just using the vertical line test. Anytime you have a graph, it's actually really easy to determine whether it's a function or not because you're just going to draw a vertical line. So I'll start over here on the right-hand side, and I'm just going to draw a vertical line. It's only hit one time, so we're good to go still. Only hits one time, only hits one time. No matter where I draw this vertical line, you'll notice that we're getting one time. So that means that yes, this is a function. But if you look at A, B, and C, for example, 3, we're going to get yes on this one, right? Only one time. So that's a function, but no on this last one because it's hitting twice. Notice no matter what, we're going to get no because it's hitting twice there. How about letter B, though? Is that a function or is it not? So you may not recognize that graph. This is actually the graph of an absolute value function. Absolute value is when you put the variable inside the two vertical bars. But it's important that we understand that, yes, this actually is a function. Because we're not drawing a horizontal line, we're drawing a vertical line. So a vertical line only hits one time no matter where we draw it. So that would also be a function. Good to go there. So what I want you to do is try a few of these practice problems, and I want you to see if you can kind of start to evaluate. So the way we evaluate is by actually using what's called function notation. So function notation is just a fancy way of saying some of the same stuff, but we have a different symbol. So you want to have a kind of a different way of expressing the same information. So what you're used to saying, like we've been talking about, is y equals mx plus b, y equals this, y equals that. And instead of using y, we're going to use the symbols f, parentheses, and x inside those parentheses. That's instead of the y value. And what that accomplishes for us is it actually helps us to read it in a little bit way. The f stands for function. So the way we read that is f, aka function of x. So it's a function of x. And we actually do this a lot. We all kind of use different functions in around us. So for example, your car is a function of its gasoline. You itself are the function of the food that you eat. Whatever the x is what you're putting into it, and then the function kicks something back out. So that's what this really means, function notation. So in the next video, we're going to look at some examples of how we actually find f of 4. So that's what we're going to look at next. So make sure we're good and then move on to the next video.